Students, based on their own declared gender identity, should have access to the restrooms of their choice.
The issue of gender identity and bathrooms is a red herring.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark, and I too want to welcome you to this edition of the American Religious Town Hall meeting. We're glad you joined us. As you heard from our opening statements, this is a topic straight from today's headlines, even though this discussion actually started a few years back. But before we get started with our program, I'd like for you to meet our panelists. We're going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do. Let's begin with the gentleman to my right.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I'm a priest, canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm an Assemblies of God minister, and I serve the church as a professor of church history and ecumenics at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister of First Christian Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas. We're a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
My name is Bert Beach. I live in the Washington, D.C. area, where I served for many years at the world headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
I'm Othel Hawthorne Lakey. I'm a bishop in retirement of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, living in Buford, Georgia.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Well, thank you, each one of you, for being here today. Looking forward to this discussion. We've touched on these subjects before. It's always been a very interesting interchange. I'm sure today will not be an exception to that. With regard to the program today, the topic, in 2013, the U.S. Departments of Education and Justice jointly released some guidelines asserting that federally funded schools must provide students access to restrooms and locker rooms and other facilities in accordance with the students' quote, self-proclaimed gender identity. Now, there's been much angry discussion on this subject of late in various states around the country and different communities. It is obviously a difficult issue for local communities and especially individual families who are confronted with a radical gender change of a family member. That's what we're going to discuss on today's program, and there are at least three questions I'd like for our panelists to consider. First of all, is it really reasonable to state that the whole matter could cause, quote, sexual chaos in some schools? The second question, is it fair to state, as some have, that government has both acted outrageously and committed an overreach of federal authority? And then finally, have advances in science, medicine, psychiatry, and surgery made gender change both possible and acceptable in society in general? That is our topic for today. Let's go back to those who made the opening remarks, and for that we return to John Peterson. Ken Peterson, welcome to the program, and tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on this subject today, please.
Thank you. And undoubtedly, it is a red herring. I suspect that many of us sitting around this table, and many of our listeners as well, are only now becoming familiar and knowledgeable about what it means to be transgendered. And I suspect that many of us cannot relate at all to what it really means to be transgendered. Several years ago, a friend of mine defined to me what it meant to him to be transgendered. He said at his birth, it was stated that he was a man. He was born male. But he said, my body has always been a prison for me, end quote. My body has always been a prison for me. While my sexual organs are male, the rest of my person is female. My body is a prison. I've never forgotten that. And as our discussion, as this discussion has had higher visibility in society today, I expect that I think more about our bodies that are indeed a prison. The femaleness of my friend was imprisoned in a male body. The term used today for when a man wants to become a female or a female wants to become a man, the term is transitioning. I suspect that most of us around this table, as well as our listening audience, most of us assume that transitioning is one of the first things that happens in that transitioning process is that there is what is called genital reconstructive surgery. But in a recent survey of 6,450 transgendered people, fewer than 25% of the transgendered women have undergone genital surgery, and fewer than 5% of transgendered men have undergone that surgery. And I suspect that that is what raises some of the issues and some of the difficulties for actually going into a bathroom if you have not actually done the transitioning process. I think I will stop there. I have more to say,
right.
but it then gives Tom a chance
Thank you.
to respond.
And then over to Reverend Plumley. You said this was a red herring issue. Tell us more about that. Why is that?
Well, I asked to take one of the first spots on this particular program because this issue has become a very real one in Fort Worth. It is a very real one in my congregation. We have a couple of transgendered young men who work in our church nursery. But in Fort Worth, the school board had long time ago passed some guidelines for bathroom usage by the few transgendered students that there are in that huge school district. And we got a new superintendent, and he was asked to create some guidelines for how to enforce that. And he and his office provided guidelines, and when he did it, our state lieutenant governor, who doesn't even deserve to have his name mentioned here, he's ironically a small government, keep the state out of local matters sort of guy, immediately came down riding into town and told the school board what they should do, and particularly what they should do was to fire the superintendent. And he raised all sorts of fears by what I will call stretching the truth. And after he finally made his political points and got out of town, Fort Worth Independent School District and the parents were able to reach a compromise over the entire issue. I said this was a red herring because it is, red herrings are classically defined as a distraction from the issue, which is the real issue. This is a distraction from the issue that we all have to deal with, which is a bullying issue. And in schools, in our particular context, we were talking about a half dozen kids out of 86,000 in the Fort Worth Independent School District who were affected by it, and they are using the restroom in the nurse's office. And so this is not a big deal. And yet it was made a big deal. And in fact, I'm sure when our state legislature goes into session in the winter, we'll have all sorts of people standing up and making very pompous statements about it. But it's really an issue of trying to provide protection from people who are very vulnerable to being bullied.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from the other panelists now. Let's come across the table to Dr. Robeck. Happy to have you here again today. Your thoughts, please, on this subject.
Yeah, I'm going to take a position that's different from the two that you've just heard. In a sense, at one level, I think there's a great deal of confusion in the United States, and around the world really, about sex and sexuality. I think enormous amounts of confusion. And I think that part of that confusion is produced by the kinds of things that we hold up all the time. I was noticing just recently in USA Today, there's a page and a half on transgendered novels for young people. Never heard of such a thing before, but now, you know, it's out there and so forth. Then I looked up the statistics on how many transgendered people there are in the United States, and they say the best we can tell is 0.3% of the population may be transgendered, which means 700,000 people around the country. Now, 700,000 people sounds like a lot of people, but you know, I have to say, having grown up in bathrooms all of my life, men's bathrooms, I'm not sure that I've ever met one, seen one, thought about one, you know, anything like that. What I think is wrong with the current situation is not so much that we're trying to provide some safe place for them to use a restroom or in some safe way. It's the fact that it's being mandated with penalties if you don't provide that, without having had the preliminary conversation in a public arena that gets all of the sides heard. What I feel like is 0.3% of the population has a big bully in place to bully the rest of us to do what that 0.3% may need. That's not to deny the need that they have. It's not to deny that there's an issue here, but it is to say, I think that the way it has come down from the government, you get the Education Department, you get the Justice Department, you get the President, all of these saying, this you will do, and if you don't, we're going to take your money away, or we're going to put you in prison, or we're going to do whatever. I think that's absolutely the wrong way to correct an issue that needs to be addressed.
All right, thank you very much. We should probably say something, too, that there's a difference between cross-dressing and transgenderism. Yes. And that distinction, we hope everyone understands that. We're talking about someone who goes to different sex assignment, through the sex change. So keep that in mind as we're discussing. Yes, please, Othel Lakey.
Thank you very much. I would take a little bit of an issue with my good friend, Dr. Mel Roback, on this 0.2%. I believe yes, I believe the statistic is accurate. My question would be, if the federal government does not speak for them, who does? And irrespective of the right or wrong of the issue, to me, to make this a federal issue is that red herring that Tom is talking about. So leaving that aside, the issue becomes, what do we do after we've had the conversation with this, 0.3%? What do we do with this 750,000 persons who are struggling, as most of us who are, quote, normal, struggling with some issues that we don't struggle with? What are they supposed to do while we are having the conversations? And who in the world are we to have a conversation about them? What am I going to say in the conversation with someone who feels that they, as John put it, you imprison in the body? What is the conversation? How do I contribute to it? So I think there's a little bit more to it than simply sitting around the table and we gonna discuss this. Here are some basic human beings struggling to live their lives from day to day. And I think that ought to be where our discussion ought to be.
So how are the rights and privileges of everyone protected, yes, and cared for, taken care of? Let's come across the table. Dr. Trovall, your comments, please.
Well, I think that the issue is just about a right of access for people. And I mean, you're right. What do we do? I mean, all right, we have 700,000 people who they need to use facilities. And so, I mean, I appreciate, Mel, your desire to, I mean, this top-down always ends up, it always is a response because something isn't dealt very well on a local level. Yep. And it's ideally dealt with best on a local level. Yep. However, you're right. Then what happens when someone's rights are infringed and someone's denied a right of access? And so clearly there's a tension, but we do have to do something. We don't live in the society we wish, but we live in the society that we have, and there are people who have needs and rights, and as much as what we might personally want, this still needs to be accommodated in some way, in a public way.
I guess some of the fear is some people are afraid of someone who might come in on one day and say, oh, today I feel like a female, so I'll go into a female restroom as a male. But tomorrow I might feel like a male again.
Sure.
And there is that deviance that I think we have to account for in society to some extent. How do we deal with that?
But that's more like cross-dressing.
Well, yes,
how
but
you
using it
define
as an excuse. And that this is where Tom might want to weigh in again.
Well, in the school context, this is only about people who have established a pattern of
Yes, have
behavior,
undergone that.
who have been in conversations with the administration of the school and with their teachers for a long time. This is not a, oh yeah, today I want to go see the girls, so I'm going to go.
Well, yes, but you understand there is that fear of some, and that could be based totally on ignorance. 100%. Let's come across the table, Dr. Beach, and then we'll come back to Carl. Dr. Beach, please.
Well, I don't have much experience in that area, I must say. In my family, I don't know of anybody that's been, but I have a close friend in Switzerland that has gone through the experience, so I know a little bit from what they have told me. I don't think it's just a red herring. On the other hand, it's not a gigantic issue that is causing waves of distress for people all over the country because the government takes certain actions. The government has to do something about it. We're so used to thinking of sex simply something that is physical. And gender is more than physical. It has to be also the brain and the body have to unite somehow. And in some people, the unity doesn't succeed. It has been divided, and it's very complicated for people to deal with it. It would be easier if some person like that changes the gender would be able to go elsewhere and start a new life in a way, because once you've been of a certain gender for everybody around you and you appear in a different gender, it complicates relationships. I could go on and say more, but I'd like to hear what some of my
Dr.
friends
Chauvel,
are
then
saying.
across back to Reverend Plumley.
Well,
Dr.
I
Chauvel.
only wanted to go back. I think that if we need to ground our actions in some kind of statistical reality. I'd really like to know what the evidence is for transgender sexual assault or sexual misconduct in restrooms. And to my understanding, I mean, I didn't scour every study, but I don't think that that's been demonstrated that that's even an issue. However, we do have certain populations that we know there's sexual misconduct happening, namely men. So
Becomes complicated to some degree. Back to Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. You can give me a doctorate if
That's
you'd like,
fine.
but that's
Well, the Lord will do
but I don't have one. Didn't
I
earn
don't
one.
have the authority to do it, so anyway. It's,
That would be a very cheap one. Yeah, we were talking before the cameras came on about the diversity of gender in the larger animal world, and how the questions about whether a particular animal in lots of different species, whether about its maleness or its femaleness, why should we be surprised that there are issues like that in our species as well? It's in a very tiny minority of people, but it's there, and as with everything else, we need to struggle together in good conversation to be understanding and loving if at all possible. And I think what I've seen coming out so far from the government is helpful in at least promoting that kind of conversation.
all right, next to you then, John Peterson, you wanted to say, we have a few moments left.
Okay. The issue, I think Carl brought it up in very early in the discussion. The issue really becomes what type of facility is offered in relationship to toilets for transgender people and how to do that. I live in a state right now, North Carolina, in which the governor of the state has rejected Obama's guidelines on this. And of course, that's in violation of Title IX, which I think it's very important to remember that Title IX actually came out of a Republican administration, out of Richard Nixon. But the issue is really, how do we make appropriate toilets available for people who understand themselves to be transgendered?
All right, thank you. And then Bishop, you wanted to say.
I just wanted to say, I wish somehow we could keep politicians from exploiting these very, as I think Dr. Robeck says, these very complex issues.
Yes.
These are not simplistic kinds of things we have to deal with as a society. They're new. We have to deal with them. I wish our politicians would stop trying to exploit them for political advantage.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry we're out of time for this segment. It went by very quickly, as it usually does for that part of the program. But there is an important announcement I'd like for you to hear. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you, Mark. I too would like to thank you for writing and for the notes that you send us, especially those of you who send in suggestions for topics to be discussed on this program. We do take them seriously. Sometimes we're not able to accommodate them all because we do get quite a number, but eventually we hope to get to them. So please continue to write, send us your suggestions, and thank you for your continued support. We're going to go to our summations now. For that, we begin with Canon Peterson.
Thank you. I mentioned earlier that I live in a state, North Carolina, where the governor has really raised issues and rejected the guidance of the Obama administration. A couple of weeks ago, I was actually in a restaurant in Brevard, North Carolina. And I've gone to this restaurant over the years, and there's always been two toilets, male and female, sign, men, women. That has now changed. This men and woman sign has been taken down, and simply two figures, a male and a female figure is there. And that's the way in which they're dealing with this issue. And I think that you're certainly correct, Carl, that this is really, how does one deal with this issue?
All right, thank you very much. Reverend Plumley, your summation.
You know, you can put locks on bathroom doors, and the first one in there gets to lock the door and until they're finished with their business. You know, there's a far greater challenge to us from the far larger group of heterosexual pedophiles than there is about anybody that's transgender, because there's so few of them. But it is important, folks, to understand the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is an issue of who one loves, and gender identity is an issue of who one essentially is.
All right, thank you. Now, Bishop Lakey, your summation, please.
Thank you very, very much. You know, in this country, we claim we celebrate diversity. We celebrate it until it becomes diverse. We celebrate it until it becomes something that we are not really used to. And we talk about, you know, diversity in terms of color and language and stuff. But here's some basic diversity. And I think we're afraid of it. We need to learn to sit down and say, okay, let us understand who these our brothers and sisters, and sometimes our biological brothers and sisters, who are they? What are they going through in their diversity?
All right, thank you. Now to Dr. Trofall, your summation, please.
Sure. I appreciated John at the very beginning kind of outlining exactly, you know, some of the definitions and ideas, and you know, the difference of gender identity and sexual orientation. I think we all need to educate ourselves profoundly on the issue, because I think, at least in my past, there was always a false association of because someone was different, they were dangerous. Because they were gay, they were possibly associated with assault or something like that, sexual assault. And I think that the fear of the unknown is what drives this, and that we need to clear and educate ourselves and realize that it really is, again, I think the issue is about a fundamental right of access for people who are not threatening.
All right, thank you. Now, Dr. Beach.
I think this is a new issue that has arisen. Of course, it existed for centuries, but it was not. It was ignored. So it takes time to adjust, to understand. I think we should have sympathy for these people because gender is something that people sometimes want to decide, but it takes a long time for them to decide. It doesn't just switch over in one day, and it takes time. And I'm a feeling that some are kind of transgender, but they're half one way. They haven't quite made up their mind completely. It takes time to do that, and we should have great sympathy for these people going through a very difficult experience.
All right, thank you very much, and for your participation. Now, Dr. Robeck.
Yeah, I am not fully convinced that sexuality and gender identity are given. I think that both of them must be formed, and I think psychologists will tell you that's something that takes place, and it depends a lot on what your father does and what your mother does, and it also depends upon genetics. There are a variety of factors there. We simply, as I would say, a normal part of the population, don't know enough to make those kinds of decisions. I would say that sexuality and gender identity continue to be an enormous place of conflict within our communities. It's a problematic area that we do not spend enough time looking at. I would say science and medicine have helped in some ways. They can make certain kinds of changes possible. I think the psychological community gives up every time they can't fix something and declare it normal. And, I really wonder about how many children and young people, a 4-year-old declares, okay, I really want to be a girl, and their parents start dressing them as girls. And how well formed is their identity as a person, let alone as sexually? The one last question I'd like to raise is
out
this.
of time.
Oh, man, in a democracy, does majority rule or does it not?
We'll have to leave that question kind of hanging in the air. I do want to thank each of you for participating today and the thought and the prayers you put into these programs. Greatly appreciated. And now the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel or however you've tuned in, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.